born, we reproduce, we die, and our offspring will do it all over again. The good old cycle of life is at the core of our existence, our purpose on Earth. Luckily, we're no longer in the Stone Age. Social norms are changing, and being a parent has become more of a choice. Financial security, career development, and personal beliefs all come into play. But what about the environment? How does it enter the equation?
Having a child is a big commitment to the future and has a big, what we called carbon legacy. Each child that we choose to have, especially in countries like France that have rather high emissions today, makes it a big commitment to the future of continued emissions over the long term.
That may seem obvious. A child born today will inevitably add CO2 to the atmosphere. But what may surprise you is that having a child may be one of the most carbon-intensive decisions you'll make in your life. Consider this. By avoiding a transatlantic flight, you can save up to 1.6 tons of CO2 a year. Living car-free, minus 2.4 tons. And then, on top of the list, having one fewer child, which can save as much as 58 tons of CO2 for each year of a parent's life. Think of all the food, nappies, laundry, toys, and the rest of the child's life as an adult. Some have taken this logic even further, foregoing parenthood as a conscious act to preserve the climate. They call themselves JINX, for Green Inclination No Kids.
My decision not to have children is linked to the environment, because I think to myself, in what world will they be born? What kind of planet will they inhabit? In the end, my choice was informed by many arguments related to the preservation of our planet. And as you grow up, you realize there's no plan B. We only have this planet.
So could going child-free really be the answer to our climate crisis? Some say it is morally questionable to equate reproduction rights with, let's say, selling your old car. But looking at the numbers, it is hard to deny the ecological footprint of a growing population. Until the early 1800s, there were 1 billion people on the planet. In just over 200 years, population shot to 7 billion. And now, we're expected to surpass 11 billion by the end of the century. During that time, greenhouse gas emissions grew massively. So with more people on this planet, environmentalists fear the Earth simply won't cope. Unless things change, we will need 3 Earths to provide for the resources we use. But the demographic argument remains controversial, as it tends to point the finger at poorer parts of the world with high fertility rates.
Industrialized countries are often saying to developing countries, what's the point of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions if you are unable to manage your demography? I think this is a false excuse, and I think it is unfair to ask developing countries to manage and control their demography, which is something that they've really little leverage on, whereas industrialized countries themselves are unable to fulfill the promise made under the Paris Agreement, are unable to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
Countries with a high fertility rate happen to be the ones with the smallest carbon footprint. Take a country like Tanzania, where women give birth to 7 children on average. Its emissions are 20 times lower than France. Advocates of population control don't really buy it. The problem, they say, is that as developing countries continue to grow, their habits will change and their carbon footprint increase.
You have 1 billion people on the planet who probably consume too much. Then you have 6 and soon 7 billion people who consume less, and we can't ask them to make an effort. We should take soft measures today so that in the future radical circumstances like war or the establishment of an oppressive regime will not force people to have 1 child or even no children at all to solve the problem.
So should we really be afraid of overpopulation? Our guest tells us more.
You can't ask a country like Germany with an average fertility rate of 1.5 births per woman or Spain with 1.3 births to have fewer children. They're already in a difficult position because of a declining population. This is posing a challenge with an aging workforce and migration. So in the long run, it's not a viable solution. In terms of CO2 emissions, children have a heavy carbon footprint when it comes to food, clothing and education. That being said, if you consider everyday consumption, Jinx will probably buy electronic appliances, will travel more since they don't have kids, and so by having fewer children, their CO2 emissions are likely to increase.
The debate shouldn't really be about how many kids we have, but how we live and consume on this planet. It is urgent that we start rethinking our energy system, the food that we eat, and how we move around. So instead of having no children at all, teaching our children to preserve their planet may be a more appropriate solution.